You're watching NFL Daily by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. Appreciate you joining us. Coming up on today's show, Pro Football Focus has a new mock draft that is out. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through every single pick of the mock draft, and I am going to share my honest and humble opinions on this mock draft. And I'll tell you this much. What's very interesting is that this mock draft, compared to some of the others that we've talked about here on the channel, it's got trades in it. More of that in just one moment. Here's what I want you to do first, though. Before we dive into the mocky, who will be the first pick of the 2023 NFL Draft? What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section who you think the first pick will be, and we'll get started with today's show. So we begin the mock draft with, whoa, a trade. Trade right from the top. Here's the trade that Pro Football Focus is projecting. The Bears receive the number 2 pick and the number 34 overall in a 4th-round pick in exchange for the Texans moving up just one spot. This feels like highway robbery here, folks. Let me explain. If the Bears are all in on Justin Fields, if they believe in him, if he is their guy, they should play coy with the Texans and kind of force them into this. Here's what I mean. You could force them into this trade and be like, hey, look, if you don't trade here, we're going to take Bryce Young. If you want him, go get him. Make them trade you here. You can, if they play their cards right, they can force this type of thing to happen and get some trade value and still get the guy they potentially want it too if they don't want Bryce Young. I like this idea potentially of a trade to force the Texans' hand, essentially. With that, of course, the Texans end up taking Bryce Young, who without question is the best quarterback in this upcoming draft from Alabama. Former Heisman Trophy winner, 32 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I know Alabama had a down year this year. They did not make the college football playoff. They lost 2 games this year. I understand all of that. But the fact that Alabama was in the games that they were in was because of Bryce Young. And I think Bryce Young can be a star in this league, potentially. And if you are the Houston Texans, you are overjoyed, I think, if you still end up with Bryce Young because of what your franchise needs and you find a young quarterback like that. Bryce Young, I think you'd be excited about. So the trade idea, though, should the Bears trade the number 1 pick? Maybe it was a situation we just presented you from Pro Football Focus, or maybe it's with another team. We know the Bears have a lot of weaknesses, a lot of holes to fill. Is that a move they should make? If you think they should trade that number 1 pick, type Y for yes. If not, type in for no. Let us know in the comments section. Number 2 on PFF's mock draft is Jalen Carter from Georgia, the defensive tackle. Jalen Carter, a terrific player, was a huge part of Georgia's 2 national titles, and Will Anderson is the next pick going to the Arizona Cardinals. And I think they're kind of 1A, 1B as far as who you like between those 2 defensive players and kind of what your needs are. I like Will Anderson a little bit more, but I won't shame you if you go with Jalen Carter either. Both players are fantastic. Then we go to number 4, and that's where we find the Indianapolis Colts selecting Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky. Now, here's where I'm at on this, folks. I am not high on Will Levis personally. I know Mel Kiper Jr. has Will Levis as his number 1 quarterback in this draft. I'm not a fan, but I'll say this. The Colts in this draft, you can't be doing these journeyman quarterbacks anymore. How much money have they spent since Andrew Luck left town on Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers? What else? Who else was there? Carson Wentz. I've lost track of how many quarterbacks they've had over the last few years. And it has been painful what they've gone through with these journeyman quarterbacks the last few years. So with that, although I don't like Will Levis, I do agree that you need a quarterback, need a first-round quarterback, and reset things for this team going forward. Reset the clock. Have a young quarterback built around there if you're Indianapolis. So, what would you rate Will Levis as an NFL prospect? Scale it for me 1 through 99. This is Madden scale. If you play Madden, you know there's no 100s in Madden. Scale it for me 1 through 99. What would you rate Will Levis as an NFL prospect? Let me know in the comment section below. Today's episode of NFL Daily is sponsored by Fume. We all have bad habits, and we certainly know how hard it can be to kick those habits. Our sponsor, Fume, is on a mission to accelerate humanity's breakup from the bad habits that consume far too many of us. Fume is a natural diffusive device that uses plants and behavioral science to help you train out your negative habits for a positive one. I didn't expect much out of Fume when I got it, but the minty sensation is really powerful and really hits the back of the throat. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors for you to enjoy, including maple pepper, crisp mint, and white cranberry. Fume is not a vape. It's a non-electronic device designed to transform your negative habits. The easiest way to stop a bad habit is to switch to a positive one, and Fume is designed perfectly to do just that. Head to tryfume.com/chatsports. Use code chatsports to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com/chatsports. Use code chatsports to save an additional 10% off your order today, and you will be glad you did. That's tryfume.com/chatsports. Back to the mock draft we go. The Seattle Seahawks, with their first of 2 picks, end up with Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher, out of Texas Tech at 5. Meanwhile, at 6, the Detroit Lions on the board for the first time. They go Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback out of Illinois. The Raiders at 7, we know they need help on the offensive line, and they go with the tackle spot with one of the best tackles in this entire draft. That is Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern at number 7. Number 8, the Falcons on the board. Falcons go defense. Brian Branch, who can do a little bit of everything, plays corner and safety, goes to Atlanta at number 5. And then number 9, we see our third quarterback of the draft go off the board, and that is C.J. Stroud going to the Carolina Panthers at spot number 9. And I'll tell you this right now. If the Panthers are sitting there at 9 and they can get C.J. Stroud at that spot, they ought to be overjoyed. They ought to be just thrilled if they get C.J. Stroud at that spot. This would be one of those situations when you look back at draft grades where this pick would be an A+. If you can find C.J. Stroud, who arguably could be the best quarterback in this draft, available at that 9 spot, you'd be feeling pretty good. Carolina, we've talked about them a lot on this channel and on other shows, that they might be a team that potentially trades up to get one of those quarterbacks. If you don't have to give up anything and stay where you're at and get C.J. Stroud, I think you're feeling pretty good. Where will C.J. Stroud end up? Will it be Carolina? Will it be a team like Indianapolis or somebody else? Let us know in the comments section where you think C.J. Stroud is going to end up getting drafted. The Eagles are in the Super Bowl, but because of a trade with the Saints last year, they still end up with the top 10 pick, and this time they go Christian Gonzalez at the cornerback spot from Oregon with the pick. 11, Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle from Georgia. He heads to Tennessee. We know that that Tennessee team needs a lot of help on that offensive line. 12, the Texans. They get Bryce Young, a receiver. They go with Quentin Johnston from TCU with the selection, pairing up Young and Johnston together to be a potential young duo there at the wide receiver and quarterback spots. The Jets go offensive line. They go Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. And then at the 14th selection, the Patriots end up with Jordan Addison, the wide receiver from Southern California. And I got to tell you, producer Jack would be thrilled about this. Here's what's interesting to me about this. Addison ahead of JSN, Jackson Smith. To me, that's a little shocking because about every other draft board and every grade that we've seen out there has shown JSN ahead of Jordan Addison. Now, let me say for the record that when you look at the 3 receivers, Quentin Johnston, JSN, Jordan Addison, I personally don't see much separation between the 3. I think they all can be great receivers. But this one, it might be reacting a little bit too much to the hamstring injury from JSN. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Personally, I think that some people are overreacting to that. But Jordan Addison, I don't think you can go wrong with either. If you're Belichick, you grab one of those 3, you're feeling great. Here is what PFF had to say about the selection of Jordan Addison to New England. When Jordan Addison's name comes up during big board assembly meetings across the NFL, some teams will focus on his lack of size at 6 foot 175 pounds. Others will focus on his 2,506 receiving yards, 25 touchdowns, and Biletnikoff Award over the past 2 years. I'm not sure the Patriots are in a position to pass up a smooth and productive playmaker in the passing game. So, what say you? Let's say, for all intents and purposes, that Quentin Johnston is off the board. What pick would you be making? Would it be JSN or would it be Jordan Addison? What's the selection you would make if you were the GM here? Tell me in the comments section. Type JSN for Jackson Smith. Type JA for Jordan Addison. Let us know in the comments section which wide receiver you'd rather have. Moving on now, let's go to pick number 15. That is where the Green Bay Packers select Myles Murphy, the edge rusher out of Clemson, with that pick to help out that defense. 16, we see another quarterback coming off the board. That is Anthony Richardson with the Washington Commanders at 16 overall. Now, if you've been watching this channel, it's no secret I am not a fan of Anthony Richardson. I don't have a first-round grade on Anthony Richardson. I think there's a lot of holes in his game. I don't think he's a very good passer. I understand he's a hell of an athlete. He can run. He's very mobile. But to me, there's just isn't enough there in the passing game. But even with that said, I'm not going to be mean today on Jordan Addison. I will just, Anthony Richardson rather. I'm going to lay low on this one. I'll say this: Washington. This feels like a Washington move for the wrong reasons. I'll leave it at that. I won't be mean to Anthony Richardson beyond that today. But to me, that feels like a Washington move for the wrong reasons historically for that franchise. Darnell Wright at the offensive tackle spot ends up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we know the Steelers need help on that offensive line. That is a team that has a solid foundation. You have your quarterback of the future with Kenny Pickett. You get him some O-line help. I think you're feeling pretty good if you grab Darnell Wright there from Tennessee at 17. 18, that is where we find Calijah Cancey, the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. I've seen some mocks that have Cancey going all the way in the second round. So this one might be a little reach to have him that high at 18, but we'll see. 19, the Bucs go with the interior of the offensive line with Osiris Torrance from Florida with the selection, staying in state there. And the Seahawks at 20 go with Joey Porter Jr., the cornerback. And remember, this is in addition to their previous selection where the Seahawks go with Tyree Wilson. So Pete Carroll and company load up at defense with their 2 top 20 picks. At 21, the Chargers. They have a new offensive coordinator now with coming over from the Dallas Cowboys, Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore gets some help in the receiving corps with Zay Flowers joining up with Justin Herbert, of course, at quarterback. And then we see the Baltimore Ravens at 22 go with Deonte Banks from Maryland. And I've seen some mocks that had Banks going all the way in the third round. So that could be a reach potentially with Banks at 22. 23, the Vikings, they go defense here with Salike Ika, the defensive tackle from Baylor, at 23. 24, the Jags. We saw this Jags team, that offense really took off in the second half of this past season with Trevor Lawrence. He and Evan Ingram had a nice connection going. Christian Kirk, some of those other guys there. Add in Michael Mayer to the fold. Maybe the Jags do some more 12 personnel potentially there with adding Michael Mayer to the fold with Evan Ingram as well. 25, that is where we find JSN. We mentioned earlier that the mock draft here had Jordan Addison going ahead of JSN. You get him here at 25. And the Giants, I think, are probably going to bring back Daniel Jones. Don't know how long that deal is. But to me, the guy that's singing the most, that's the most happy about this pick has got to be Daniel Jones to get more help in that receiving corps. The Giants took a huge step in the right direction this year. But if you can add another receiver, if you can get another weapon involved here, Let's see if they can take another step potentially. I think you're overjoyed, especially if you're Daniel Jones, if this pick is made. Moving on now, a few more picks left in the first round. The Dallas Cowboys go defense, corner with Clark Phillips III out of Utah. 27, the Bills go with Bijan Robinson from the University of Texas with this selection. And I know some of you are thinking, like, really? You go with a running back in the first round? Well, Bijan's kind of the exception to the rule. He's the best running back prospect we've seen probably since Leonard Fournette or Saquon Barkley. He's kind of in that upper echelon of elite running backs potentially. And the Bills, they need help in the running game. We saw they couldn't compete with the weapons of the Bengals when they were eliminated by Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago. 28, that is where we see another tight end come off the board. If you're not familiar with Darnell Washington, it's okay. Tight end from Georgia was not the number one tight end for the Georgia Bulldogs. Remember, that was Brock Bowers from Georgia, who was outstanding, the best tight end in the country this past year. And Darnell Washington, more of a blocking tight end. He only had about 2 receiving touchdowns. But how much was he kind of being held back by having to play with Brock and pairing the two together? Now, I'll say this. I need to see more from Darnell Washington, and maybe we'll see that in these pre-draft workouts. But as much as I love the tight end position, 2 tight ends in the first round might be a reach potentially. That one, to me, I don't know if that quite the math checks out on that one if Darnell Washington is a first-round talent. But as you look to the left of me, I think I'm pointing the right way. There we go, yeah. To the left of me, what stands out there? Darnell Washington, 6'7", 270. Teams are going to like that. If you can run and catch at 6'7", 270, probably a spot for you in the National Football League. Here's PFF with more on Darnell Washington. Washington feels too unique of a talent to not be a first-rounder. No, he's not. He's likely not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver in the NFL, but at 6'7", 275, he blocks like an offensive lineman. He earned an 81.3 run grade and a 78.4 pass blocking grade in 2022. He's also a stellar weight-adjusted athlete who put up an 83.2 receiving grade. So with that grade from PFF, you can see, although the numbers weren't flashy, he was really good for when he was involved in the passing game with that high grade he received. 2 tight ends in the first. Is that going to happen? What do you think? How many tight ends are going to get picked in the first round of the 2022 or 2023 NFL Draft? Let us know in the comment section below. Couple more picks before we wrap things up here. Denver at 29. They go Trenton Simpson, the linebacker from Clemson, with this selection. 30, the Kansas City Chiefs get Brian Bryce at the defensive tackle spot with that 30th pick. And then to round out at 31, the Philadelphia Eagles. And remember, there's 31 picks, not 32, because the Dolphins had to forfeit that pick. They go with Lucas Van Ness. And I guess Pro Football Focus is then predicting the Eagles to beat the Chiefs, if that's the case. Lucas Van Ness, the defensive lineman out of Iowa with that final selection. So, before we go, how would you grade the mock draft from PFF? To me, it was kind of all over the place. There was a lot of peaks and valleys to this one. I would give it about a B-, maybe a C+. It was just kind of wacky. I'll put it that way. There may have been too much trust in the PFF grades, quite frankly. I'll give it about a B- or C+. What say you? Let us know in the comment section how you'd grade Pro Football Focus's mock draft. As always, you can interact with me on all those social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, talking about the National Football League, and I'll see you next time here on NFL Daily.